Good afternoon everyone and welcome to the stream. So we're going to continue with our normal Wednesday poetry, prose and riddles. Regarding the poetry, last week we left off on, or rather the last poem we read was Ode to the West Wind by Percy Shelley. So that's where we'll begin today. We'll have a quick read through of Ode to the West Wind again, and then we'll move on to poems that we haven't looked at yet and analyse them in more detail. So, Ode to the West Wind. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou, from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven, like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes, O thou, who charitest to their dark wintry bed. The winged seeds where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion o'er the dreaming earth, and fill, driving sweet buds like flocks to feed in air, with living hues and odours plain and hill. Wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, O hear! Thou on whose stream mid the steep sky's commotion, loose clouds like earth's decaying leaves are shed, shook from the tangled boughs of heaven and ocean. Angels of rain and lightning, there are spread on the blue surface of thine airy surge, like the bright hair uplifted from the head of some fierce maenad, even from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height. The locks of the approaching storm thou dirge, of the dying year to which the closing night will be the dome of a vast sepulchre, vaulted from all thy congregated might, or vapours from whose solid atmosphere black rain and fire, hail will burst. O hear! Thou who didst waken from his summer dreams the blue Mediterranean where he lay, lulled by the coil of his crystalline streams, beside a pumice isle in Bayer's Bay, and saw in sleep old palaces and towers quivering within the waves' intenser day, all overgrown with azure moss and flowers, so sweet the sense faints picturing them. Thou, for whose path the Atlantic's level powers cleave themselves into chasms, while far below the sea blooms and the oozy woods which wear the sapless foliage of the ocean know thy voice, and suddenly grow grey with fear, and tremble and despoil themselves. O hear! If I were a dead leaf thou mightest bear, if I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, a wave to pant beneath thy power and share the impulse of thy strength, only less free than thou, O uncontrollable! If I were, as in my boyhood, and could be, the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then, when to outstrip thy skyey speed scarce seemed a vision, I would never have striven, as thus with thee in prayer and my sore need. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud, I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed one too like thee, tameless and swift and proud. Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone, sweet through its sadness. Be thou spirit fierce, my spirit, be thou me, impetuous one. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe, like withered leaves to quicken a new birth, and by the incantation of this verse, scatter as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks, my words among mankind, breathe through my lips to unawakened earth, the trumpet of prophecy, O wind. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? So a lovely little piece there. Quite reasonably complex though. Obviously we went through it in detail last week. But a lot to unpack, certainly. So, on to the first new poem of this week, The Cloud, also by Percy Shelley. The Cloud. I bring fresh... My apologies, let me start again. I bring fresh flowers... Nope. I'm still struggling for some reason. I'll start again. I bring fresh showers for the thirsting flowers from the seas and the streams, I bear light shade for the leaves one laid in their noonday dreams. From my wings are shaken the dews that waken the sweet buds every one, when rocked to rest on thy mother's breast as she dances about the sun. I wield the flail of the lashing hail, and whiten the green plains under, and then again I dissolve it in rain, and laugh as I pass in thunder. I sift the snow on the mountains below, and their great pines groan aghast, and all the night 'tis my pillow white, while I sleep in the arms of the blast. Sublime on the towers of my skyey bowers, lightning my pilot sits. In a cavern under is fettered the thunder, it struggles and howls at fits. Over earth and ocean with gentle motion, this pilot is guiding me, lured by the love of the genii that move in the depths of the purple sea, over the rills and the crags and the hills, over the lakes and the plains, wherever he dream, under mountain or stream, the spirit he loves remains, and I all the while bask in heaven's blue smile, while he is dissolving in rains. The sanguine sunrise with his meteor eyes, and his burning plumes outspread, leaps on the back of my sailing rack, when the morning star shines dead, as on the jag of a mountain crag, which an earthquake rocks and swings. An eagle alit one moment may sit in the light of its golden wings, and when sunset may breathe from the lit sea beneath its ardour of rest and of love, and the crimson pall of eve may fall from the depths of heaven above, with wings folded I rest on mine airy nest, as still as a brooding dove. The orbed maiden with white fire laden, who mortals call the moon, glides glimmering o'er my fleece-like floor by the midnight breezes strewn, and wherever the beat of her unseen feet, which only the angels hear, may have broken the woof of my tent's thin roof, the stars peep behind her and peer, and I laugh to see them whirl and flee like a swarm of golden bees, when I widen the rent in my wind-built tent, till the calm rivers, lakes and seas, like strips of the sky fallen through me on high, and each paved with the moon and these. I bind the sun's throne with a burning zone, and the moon's with a girdle of pearl. The volcanoes are dim and the stars reel and swim when the whirlwinds my banner unfurl. From cape to cape with bridge-like shape over a torrent sea, sunbeam proof I hang like a roof, the mountains its columns be. The triumphal arch through which I march, the hurricane fire and snow, when the powers of the air are changed to my share, is the million-coloured bow. The sphere fire above its soft colours wove, while the moist earth was laughing below. I am the daughter of earth and water, and the nursling of the sky. I pass through the pores of the ocean and shores. I change, but I cannot die. For after the rain, when with never a stain, the pavilion of heaven is bare, and the winds and sunbeams with their convex gleams build up the blue dome of air, I silently laugh at my own cenotaph, and out of the caverns of rain, like a child from the womb, like a ghost from the tomb, I arise and unbuild it again. Goodness. A lot to unpack here as well. Okay, let's begin with any words we didn't recognise. I'm going to have a quick look through again. I don't think I saw any words I didn't recognise. Possibly there were one or two. If you see any words you're not sure about or would just like to discuss, please leave a comment in chat and I will look at it shortly. pool, and the crimson pool of Eve may fall. Fine cloth, especially purple cloth used for robes. That seems likely. A heavy cloth laid over a coffin or tomb. A shroud laid over a corpse. Okay. So senses relating to cloth. So it seems quite believable that this would be referring to a crimson cloth. An outer garment, a cloak, mantle or robe, something that covers or surrounds like a cloak. Okay, so again, this seems along similar lines. From Latin, pallium, cloak covering. Well, we know it's a noun usage. A feeling of nausea caused by disgust or overindulgence. Pull to make vapid. Seems unlikely. Okay. So it's clearly in the cloth or covering sense, I would suggest. And the crimson pool of Eve may fall from the depth of heaven above. I wonder what he means by orbed in this sense. And in fact, is it orbed because of the accent? I looked it up with the accent and it just redirected me here. So it looks like it just mean having the form of an orb, a sphere. The orbed maiden with white fire laden, whom mortals call the moon. So yeah, that just means spherical. I'm not sure what the point of that accent is. Peculiar. Have broken the woof of my tent's thin roof. Okay, what do they mean by woof? Or what does the author mean by woof? Clearly not the noise a dog makes. A set of yarns placed crosswise in a loom, interlaced with the warp, carried by the shuttle weft. A fabric, the texture of a fabric. Okay, that would make sense. To a degree. Yep, it is pronounced woof. Okay, that must be it then. Okay, so it's a reference to part of the fabric. Now zone, I seem to remember, can mean a circle or ring, if I recall. If I'm correct, because I think we came across that in a previous poem. Any given region or area of the world. A band or area of growth encircling anything. A band or strip extending around a body. Belt or girdle. A circuit, a circumference. So yes. I bind the sun's throne with a burning zone, and the moon's with a girdle of pearl. Yes, as with when we came across zone before, I think that was referring to a fragrance zone. Could that have been in John Keats' poem La Dame Sans Merci? Let's check. I made a garland for her head, and bracelets too, and fragrant zone. She looked at me as she did love, and made sweet moan. So yes, that's John Keats' poem La Belle Dame Sans Merci. My memory. Sorry. So yes, La Belle Dame Sans Merci. As in that case, I comprehend the idea that zone is being used to mean a ring-like shape, but I feel like I'm not getting the full meaning. I bind the sun's throne with a burning zone. I'm not fully getting that. And the moon's with a girdle of pearl. I feel like there's some context there that I'm just not getting. Still. Cenotaph. That was another one. So there were actually quite a few words I needed to look up. A monument, especially in the form of an empty tomb erected to honour the dead whose bodies lie elsewhere, especially members of the armed forces who died in battle. Oh. Okay, so I think that's all the words that I need to look up. If there's any words that anyone watching would like looked up, please leave a comment in chat and we'll happily do so. So the title of this poem is The Cloud, so I assume this is being written from the perspective of a cloud. I bring fresh showers for the thirsting flowers from the seas and the streams. So that makes sense. So I suppose the next thing to look at is rhythm and rhyme. So the number of syllables per line is all over the place. And the number of verses per stanza is also varying. I don't... Yeah, so as a result, I don't know to consistent structure to it in terms of rhythm. We have a B, C, B rhyming scheme. See, that's 12 verses. This one has 14, I think. No, is that 18? Yes, 18, sorry. And in this case, they actually, for the last two verses, they actually rhyme with the previous 4. So it's an A, B, C, B, D, B rhyming scheme there. And so on. As usual, I'm seeing a tendency towards iambic pentameter. So not pentameter, towards an iambic meter, but it's inconsistent, I think. So for example, I sift. I think it's very likely you would emphasize the sift. The snow, good so far, on the mountains below, which doesn't work. Clearly mountains wants to be trochaic in this verse. I sift the snow on the mountains below. I sift the snow on the mountains below. Yeah, and it'd be below, wouldn't it? Not below, below. So there seems to be an odd there seems to be something odd going on around the on the. We start with 2 pairs of iambic feet, then we appear to have a pair of pyrrhic feet, followed by a pair of trochaic feet, which I don't quite understand. Maybe my own ignorance here. That certainly seems quite likely, but I can't figure it out. There is indeed a page about it on Wikipedia. Oh, the poem consists of 6 stanzas in anapestic or antidactyl meter. A foot with 2 unaccented syllables followed by an accented syllable. Oh. But wouldn't that make it I sift the snow on the mountains below? Which doesn't seem right. Unless they're docking a syllable at the start. Hold on. I sift the snow on the mountains below. That's 10. Oh, maybe if you add an extra accent... Hold on. Let me make sure I've got this the right way round. So, anapestic. So... That's going to be short, long, isn't it? Let me double check that. I'm 90% certain that's right, though. Yep. Sorry about the delay. Yep, it's short, long. So maybe maybe this works if you put an extra stressed accent right at the start. I sift the snow on the mountains below. That works. Oh, so maybe it is below, not below. And their great pines grown aghast, and all the night 'tis my pillow white, while I sleep in the arms of the blast, sublime on the towers of my skyey bowers. It sort of works. Not brilliantly, though. A cloud is a metaphor for the unending cycle of nature. I silently laugh at my own cenotaph. I arise and unbuild it again. Yes. They don't seem to give much more information on the meter, do they? The poem consists of 6 stanzas in anapestic or antidactylous meter. A foot with 2 unaccented syllables followed by an accented syllable. Yeah. I don't fully follow. I feel like there's something else going on there. Oh well, we can't dwell on that too long. So the official answer is it's got an anapestic meter. Although, as I say, that doesn't completely figure to me. I feel like there's something else going on as well. What else can I say? I've talked about the rhythm. I've talked about the rhyme. I've looked up the meaning of any words we're unsure of. And Wikipedia's got us covered for the meaning. That the cloud is a metaphor for the unending cycle of nature. So I think that's about everything. So I'll move on to the final reading and then we'll look at the next poem. If there's anything at all that you'd like to discuss about this poem, please leave a comment in chat and we will do so. The cloud. I bring fresh flowers for the first thing... I'm sorry. Let me start again. I bring fresh showers for the bursting flowers from the seas and the streams. I bear light shade for the leaves when laid, and their noonday dreams From my wings are shaken, the dews awaken, the sweet buds every one. When rocked to rest on their mother's breast as she dances about the sun, I wield the flail of the lashing hail, and whiten the green plains under, and then again I dissolve it in rain, and laugh as I pass in thunder. I sift the snow on the mountains below, and their great pines groan aghast, and all the night is my pillow white, while I sleep in the arms of the blast. Sublime on the towers of my skiey bowers, lightning my pilot sits. In a cavern under is fettered the thunder, it struggles and howls at fits. Over earth and ocean with gentle motion the pilot is guiding me, lured by the love of the genii that move in the depths of the purple sea, over the rills and the crags and the hills and the lakes and the plains. Wherever he dream under mountain or stream, the spirit he loves remains. And I all the while bask in heaven's blue smile, whilst he is dissolving in rains. The sanguine sunrise with his meteor eyes and his burning plumes outspread leaps on the back of my sailing wrack, when the morning star shines dead, as on the jag of a mountain crag, which an earthquake rocks and swings, and eagle lit one moment may sit in the light of the golden wings, and when the sunset may breathe from the lit sea beneath its ardours of love, of rest and of love, and the crimson pall of eve may fall from the depths of heaven above. With wings folded I rest on mine airy nest, as still as a brooding dove. The orbed maiden with white fire laden, whom mortals call the moon, glides glimmering o'er my fleece-like floor, by the midnight breezes strewn. And wherever the beats of her unseen feet, which only the angels hear, may have broken the woof of my tent's thin roof, the stars peep behind her and peer, and I laugh to see them whirl and flee like a swarm of golden bees, when I widen the rent of my wind-built tent, till the calm rivers, lakes, and seas, like strips of the sky fallen through me on high, are each paved with the moon and these. I bind the sun's throne with a burning zone, and the moon's with a girdle of pearl. The volcanoes are dim and the stars reel and swim, when the whirlwinds my banner unfurl. From cape to cape with bridge-like shape, over a torrent sea, sunbeam proof I hang like a roof, the mounting its columns be, the triumphal arch through which I march, with hurricane fire and snow. When the powers of the air are chained to my chair is the million-coloured bow. The sphere fire above its soft colours wove, while the moist earth was laughing below. And the daughter of earth and water and the nursling of the sky, I pass through the pores of the ocean and shores. I change, but I cannot die. For after the rain, when with never a stain, the pavilion of heaven is bare, and the winds and sunbeams with their convex gleams build up the blue dome of air, I silently laugh at my own cenotaph, and out of the caverns of rain, like a child from the womb, like a ghost from the tomb, I arise and build it again. So, quite a lovely little piece there. Certainly complex. I feel like I could spend quite a lot more time analysing that if I wanted, but we should move on. So, the next piece, also by Percy Shelley. There seems to be quite a lot of his poetry in this anthology. That's not a complaint though. The next one is To a Skylark. So, hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird thou never wert, that from heaven or near it, purest thy full heart in profuse strains of unpremeditated art. Higher still and higher from the earth thou springest, like a cloud of fire, the blue deep thou wingest, and singing still dost soar, and soaring ever singest. In the golden lightning of the sunken sun, o'er which clouds are brightening, thou dost float and run like an unbodied joy whose race is just begun. The pale purple even melts around thy flight, like a star of heaven in the broad daylight. Thou art unseen, but yet I hear thy shrill delight, keen as are the arrows of that silver sphere, whose intense lamp narrows in the white dawn clear, until we hardly see, we feel that it is there. All the earth and air with thy voice is loud, and when night is bare, from one lonely cloud the moon rains out her beams, and heaven is overflowed. What thou art we know not. What is most like thee? From rainbows clouds there flow not drops so bright to see, as from thy presence showers a rain of melody, like a poet hidden in the light of thought, singing hymns unbidden, till the world is wrought to sympathy with hopes and fears it heeded not, like a high-born maiden in a palace tower, soothing her love-laden soul in secret hour, with music sweet as love, which overflows her bower, like a glowworm golden in a dell of dew, scattering unbeholden in aerial hue among the flowers and grass which screen it from the view, like a rose embowered in its own green leaves, by warm winds deflowered, till the scent it gives makes faint with too much sweet these heavy winged thieves. Sounds of vernal showers on the twinkling grass, rain awakened flowers, all that ever was, joyous and clear and fresh thy music doth surpass. Teach us, sprite or bird, what sweet thoughts are thine. I have never heard praise of love or wine that painted forth a flood of rapture so divine. Chorus hymeneal, of triumphal chaunt, matched with thine would be all but an empty vaunt, a thing wherein we feel there is some hidden want. What objects are the fountains of thy happy strain? What fields or waves or mountains? What shapes of sky or plain? What love of thine own kind? What ignorance of pain? With thy clear, keen joyance, languor cannot be. Shadow of annoyance never can near thee. Thou lovest, but never know love's sad satiety. Waking or asleep, thou of death must deem things more true and deep than we mortals dream. Or how could thy notes flow in such a crystal stream? But look before and after, and pine for what is not. Our sincerest laughter with some pain is fraught. Our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought. Yet if we could scorn hate and pride and fear, if we were things born not to shed a tear, I know not how thy joy we ever should come near. Better than all measures of delightful sound, better than all treasures that in books are found. Thy skill to poet were, thou scorner of the ground. Teach me half the gladness that thy brain must know. Such harmonious madness from my lips would flow. The world should listen then, as I am listening now. Yeah, again, quite a lot to unpack there. So let's begin by looking at words we don't recognise, as always. I need a reminder about blithe. Casually careless or indifferent, showing a lack of concern. Hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird thou never wert, that from heaven or near it pourest thou full heart in profuse strains of unpremeditated art. Wouldn't wert be an archaic form of were? Yes. Second person singular simple past indicative of be. Also second person singular simple past subjunctive of be. Unbidden. So that would be not... Unbidden would mean not bidded. So Not asked to do something, presumably, of one's own accord. Not invited, requested, or asked for, yes. Bower. That one keeps coming up. A bedroom or private apartment, especially for women in medieval castle. A dwelling, a picturesque country cottage, especially one that is used as a retreat. A shady, leafy shelter or recess in a garden or woods. Okay. Embowered. To enclose something or someone as in a bower, shelter with foliage. Like a rose embowered in its own green leaves, by warm winds deflowered till the scent it gives makes faint with too much sweet these heavy winged thieves. Vernal. Vernal. That sounds very familiar. Is that to do with autumn? Or the evening? Oh, pertaining to or occurring in spring. Okay, so I was quite the way off. Having characteristics like spring, fresh, young, youthful. I was in vernal equinox. Okay, that makes sense. Sound of vernal showers, of the twinkling grass, rain awakened flowers, all that ever was, joyous and clear and fresh, thy music dusts the path. Hymeneal. Presumably that means similar to a hymn? There we go. Archaic form of hymeneal. Pertaining to marriage, pertaining to sexual relations, or pertaining to the hymen. Hymeneal, I'm guessing. That makes sense, because it is... Oh no, a hymn, song, or poem in the honour of a wedding. Ah. I wonder if that's where the etymology of hymen comes from. If it does, then it's the other way round. I think. Well, it certainly seems like there's some strange... joint etymology between hymen in the sense of marriage and hymen in the sense of the body part, as well as one would think some connection to him. Strange. You'd think in this context it's almost certainly a hymn, song, or poem in honour of a wedding. Let's see what my physical dictionary has to say. Oh, this is interesting. Hymen, god of marriage. Doesn't seem to have Hymeneal though. Still, given the date of the poetry, the sensibilities of the time, and the context, I would suggest that this is a reference to a hymn celebrating a marriage. Chorus Hymeneal of triumphal chaunt. Chaunt? Obsolete spelling of chant. Okay. Triumphal chant. Matched with thine would be all, but an empty vaunt. Vaunt. To speak boastfully. To speak boastfully about. To boast of. To make a vain display of. To display with ostentation. As in vaunted, presumably. But an empty vaunt. A thing wherein we feel there is some hidden want. Langor cannot be. Langor. A state of the body or mind caused by exhaustion or disease and characterized by a languid or weary feeling, lassitude, an instance of this. Melancholy caused by love sickness, sadness, etc. Dullness, sluggishness, lack of vigor, stagnation. Okay, that makes sense. Languor. Languor cannot be, shadow of annoyance never came near thee. Thou lovest, but never knew love's sad satiety. Is that right? Satiety, yeah, the state of being satiated. Or could it be satiety? Society, I think that's correct. That makes sense. Thou lovest, but never knew love's sad society. Wake or asleep. Da, da, da. So I think that's all the words that require looking up. So, rhythm and rhyme. This looks like A, B, A, B, B. Though that would imply that worse is supposed to rhyme with heart. That's possible, isn't it? It could be what? I wouldn't know otherwise. Doesn't look like it. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's close. There's certainly consonants there. What was I thinking? That was it. I wanted to check if I knew of a suitable name for this form or not. I don't think I do. No, I don't. Okay. Hail to thee, blithe spirit. Bird thou never wert. Bird thou never wert. That from heaven or near it. Purest thy full heart. In profuse strains of unpremeditated art. Higher still and higher. Higher still and higher. This seems trochaic, but a trochee that's been docked its final weak syllable to give it a masculine ending. Of the sunken sun. Of the sunken sun. Yep, I think that's right. Is there any pattern to syllable count? Hail to thee, blithe spirit. 6. Bird thou never wert. 5. That from heaven or near it. That's 7, isn't it? That from heaven or near it. That's 7, unless they're going to use the archaic pronunciation of heaven, where they turn it into a monosyllable. Purest thy full heart. 5. In profuse strains of unpremeditated art. That's 12, I think. That is pronounced blithe, isn't it? Yes, it is. Higher still and higher. 7. From the earth thou springest. 7. Like a cloud of fire. 6. The blue deep thou wingest. 7. Okay, I think it's safe to say at this point that, again, there isn't a clear pattern to the number of syllables on each line, or the number of accents even. It seems a bit irregular there. If this form has a name, I don't know what it is. But at least in terms of rhyme, we've narrowed it down to an ABABB structure, and it looks like it's trochaic with the final syllable docked to give it a masculine ending. As for meaning, it's a good question. Beyond the obvious praise of the skylark as being a beautiful singer, it was inspired by an evening walk in the country near Livorno, Italy, with his wife Mary Shelley, and describes the appearance and song of a skylark they came upon. Mary Shelley described the event that inspired Shelley to write to a skylark. In the spring we spent a week or two near Leghorn, Livorno. It was on a beautiful summer evening while wandering among the lanes whose myrtle hedges were the bowers of the fireflies that we heard the carolling of the skylark. Alexander Mackie argued in 1906 that the poem, along with John Keats' Ode to a Nightingale, are the two of the glories of English literature. The nightingale and the lark for a long monopolised poetic idolatry and privilege they enjoyed solely on account of their pre-eminence as songbirds. Keats' Ode to a Nightingale and Shelley's Ode to a Skylark are two of the glories of English literature, but both were written by men who had no claim to a special or exact knowledge of the ornithology as such. We won't read the whole article. The Skylark's song is a metaphor or symbol of nature, as in the cloud. Shelley seeks to understand nature, to find its meaning. This is his objective. The poem is infused with pathos because he knows that this is an elusive quest. Which one was pathos again? I always forget. The quality or property of anything which touches the feelings or excites emotions and passions. From pathos, suffering, as in pathological, presumably. Okay. Is there anything on the page about meter? The poem consists of 20 strong stanzas made up of 5 lines each. The first 4 lines are metered in trochaic trimeter, the 5th in iambic hexameter, also called Alexandrine. Is that an Alexandrine? My memory had been they were slightly different, but my memory may be completely at fault. Alexandrine, a line of iambic hexameter typically found in English, is the last line of a Spenserian stanza or similar pentametric verse arrangement. Yeah, I thought so. So that isn't the structure I'm used to. Hail to thee, blithe spirit. Bird thou never wert. That from heaven or near it pourest thou full heart, and few strains of unpremeditated art. No, I can believe that. That makes perfect sense. Now that Wikipedia set me straight, I would agree. 4 lines of trochaic trimeter followed by a 5th in iambic hexameter, following an ABABB rhyme scheme. So, that's the structure. So we'll move on to the final reading, and then we will move on to the novel section, of the prose section of this stream, and carry on with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So, to a Skylark. Hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird thou never wert, that from heaven or near it pourest thy full heart, in profuse strains of unpremeditated art. Higher still and higher, from the earth thou springest, like a cloud of fire, the blue deep thou wingest, and singing still dost soar, and soaring ever singest, in the golden lighting of the sunken sun, o'er which clouds are brightening, thou dost float and run, like an unbodied joy whose race is just begun. The pale purple even melts around thy flight, like a star of heaven, in the broad daylight. Thou art unseen, but yet I hear thy shrill delight. Keen as are the arrows of that silver sphere, whose intense lamp narrows in the white dawn clear, until we hardly see, we feel that it is there. Or the earth and air, why thy voice is loud, as when night is bare, from one lonely cloud, the moon rains out her beams and heaven is overflowed. What thou art we know not, what is most like thee? From rainbow clouds there flow not drops so bright to see, as from thy present showers a rain of melody, like a poet hidden in the light of thought, singing hymns unbidden till the world is wrought, to sympathy with hopes and fears it heeded not, like a high-born maiden in a palace tower, soothing her love-laden soul in secret hour, with music sweet as love, which overflows her bower, like a glowworm golden in a dell of dew, scattering unbeholden in aerial hue among the flowers and grass which screen it from the view, like a rose embowered in its own green leaves, by warm winds deflowered, till the scent it gives makes faint with too much sweet these heavy-winged thieves. Sounds of vernal showers on the twinkling grass, rain-awakened flowers, all that ever was, joyous and clear and fresh thy music doth surpass. Teachers, sprite or bird, what sweet thoughts are thine? I have never heard praise of love or wine that panted forth a flood of rapture so divine. Chorus hymeneal or triumphal chant, matched with thine would be all but an empty vaunt, a thing wherein we feel there is some hidden want. What objects are the fountains of thy happy strain? What fields or waves or mountains? What shapes of sky or plain? What love of thine own kind? What ignorance of pain? With thy clear keen joyance, languor cannot be. Shadow of annoyance never came near thee. Thou lovest, but never knew love's sad society. Waking or asleep, thou of death must deem things more true and deep than we mortals dream. Or how could thy notes flow in such a crystal stream? We look before and after, and pine for what is not. As sincerest laughter with some pain is fraught, as sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought. Yet if we could scorn, hate and pride and fear, if we were things born not to shed a tear, I know not how thy joy would we ever should come near. Better than all measures of delightful sound, better than all treasures that in books are found, thy skilled poet were, thou scorner of the ground. Teach me half the gladness that thy brain must know, such harmonious madness from my lips would flow. The world should listen then, as I am listening now. So, that's the end of the poetry section. So as usual, we'll begin the prose section by recapping what we read last week. Last week we began on letter 3, which largely just told us that the voyage was continuing without excessive or unusual hardship. Then letter 4. The crew spotted what looked to be a man of gigantic stature in a sled drawn by dogs. However, shut in by ice, it was impossible to follow his track. The next morning, the captain found his crew persuading an entirely different man in a sled to come aboard. Only one of his dogs remained alive. The man was haggard and woebegone. After many days of recuperating on board the vessel, the man formed a friendship with the captain, who he believes possesses a similar fanatical drive as his own. Then, in chapter 1, the captain's friend begins recounting his history. His name is Victor, and Victor is by birth Genovese, his family being one of the most distinguished of that republic. When he was quite young, and by a series of remarkable and sometimes tragic events, he came to have an adopted sister. Though they referred to each other as cousins, they were of no blood relation. Her name was Elizabeth. The whole world adored Elizabeth, though none more so than Victor, who saw her as his personal charge. So, that's where we were up to. Chapter 2. We were brought up together. There was not quite a year difference in our ages. I need not say that we were strangers to any species of disunion or dispute. Harmony was the soul of our companionship, and the diversity and contrast that subsisted in our characters drew us nearer together. Elizabeth was of a calmer and more concentrated disposition, but with all my ardour, I was capable of a more intense application, and was more deeply smitten with the thirst for knowledge. She busied herself with following the aerial creations of the poets, and in the majestic and wondrous scenes which surrounded our Swiss home, the sublime shapes of the mountains, the changes of the seasons, tempest and calm, the silence of winter, and the life and turbulence of our alpine summers, she found ample scope for admiration and delight, while my companion contemplated with a serious and satisfied spirit the magnificent appearances of things. I delighted in investigating their causes. The world was to me a secret which I desired to divine. Curiosity, earnest research to learn the hidden laws of nature, gladness akin to rapture as they were enfolded to me, are among the earliest sensations I can remember. On the birth of a second son, my junior by 7 years, my parents gave up entirely their wandering life and fixed themselves in their native country. We possessed a house in Geneva and a campagna of Bellerive. I do not recognise that word. Where are we? Plural of campagna. A flat stretch of countryside, open rural plain. So, we possessed a house in Geneva and a campagna on Bellerive, the eastern shore of the lake, at the distance of rather more than a league from the city. We resided principally in the latter, and the lives of my parents were passed in considerable seclusion. It was my temper to avoid a crowd and to attach myself fervently to a few. I was indifferent, therefore, to my schoolfellows in general, but I united myself in the bonds of the closest friendship to one of them. Henry Clerval was the son of a merchant of Geneva. He was a boy of singular talent and fancy. He loved enterprise, hardship, and even danger for its own sake. He was deeply read in books of chivalry and romance. He composed heroic songs and began to write many a tale of enchantment and knightly adventure. He tried to make us act plays and to enter into masquerades, in which the characters were drawn from the heroes of Roncesvalles, of the Round Table of King Arthur, and the chivalrous train who shed their blood to redeem only the Holy Sepulchre from the hands of the infidels. Interesting. No human being could have passed a happier childhood than myself. My parents were possessed by the very spirit of kindness and indulgence. We felt that we were not the tyrants to rule our lot according to their caprice, but the agents and creators of all the many delights which we enjoyed. When I mingled with other families, I distinctly discerned how peculiarly fortunate my lot was, and gratitude assisted the development of filial love. Trying to remember, filial love, is that love towards one's parents? Pertaining to or befitting a son or daughter. So essentially, yes. Respectful of the duties and attitudes of sons or daughters towards their parents. Yep. My temper was sometimes violent and my passions vehement, but by some law in my temperature they were turned not towards childish pursuits, but to an eager desire to learn, and not to learn all things indiscriminately. I confess that neither the structure of languages, nor the code of governments, nor the politics of various states possessed attractions for me. It was the secret of heaven and earth that I desired to learn, and whether it was the outward substance of things, or the inner spirit of nature, and the mysterious soul of man that occupied me, still my inquiries were directed to the metaphysical, or, in its highest sense, the physical secrets of the world. Meanwhile, Clerval occupied himself, so to speak, with the moral relations of things. the busy stage of life. The virtues of heroes and the actions of men were his theme, and his hope and his dream was to become one among those whose name was recorded in story as the gallant and adventurous benefactors of our species. The saintly soul of Elizabeth shone like a shrine-dedicated lamp in our peaceful home. Her sympathy was ours. Her smile, her soft voice, the sweet glance of her celestial eyes were ever there to bless and animate us. She was the living spirit of love to soften and attract. I might become sullen in my study, rough through the ardour of my nature, but that she was there to subdue me to a semblance of her own gentleness. And Clerval, could aught ill entrench on the noble spirit of Clerval? And Clerval, could aught ill entrench on the noble spirit of Clerval? Yet he might not have been so perfectly humane, so thoughtful in his generosity, so full of kindness and tenderness amidst his passion for adventurous exploit, had she not unfolded to him the real loveliness of beneficence, and made the doing good the end and aim of his soaring ambition. I feel exquisite pleasure in dwelling on the recollections of my childhood, before misfortune had tainted my mind, and changed its bright visions of extensive usefulness into gloomy and narrow reflections upon self. Besides, in drawing the picture of my early days, I also record those events which led, by insensible steps, to my aftertale of misery. For when I would account to myself for the birth of that passion which afterwards ruled my destiny, I find it arise like a mountain river from ignoble and almost forgotten sources. But swelling as it proceeded, it became the torrent which, in its course, has swept away all my hopes and joys. Natural philosophy is the genius that has regulated my fate. I desire, therefore, in this narration, to state these facts which led to my predilection for that science. When I was 13 years of age, we all went on a party of pleasure to the baths near Thonon. The inclemency of the weather obliged us to remain a day confined to the inn. In this house I chanced to find a volume of the works of Cornelius Agrippa. I opened it with apathy. The theory which he attempts to demonstrate and the wonderful facts which he relates soon change his feeling into enthusiasm. A new light seemed to dawn upon my mind, and, bounding with joy, I communicated my discovery to my father. My father looked carelessly at the title page of the book and said, "Ah, Cornelius Agrippa, my dear Victor, do not waste your time upon this. It is sad trash." If instead of this remark my father had taken the pains to explain to me what the principles of Agrippa had been entirely exploded, and that a modern system of science had been introduced, which possessed much greater powers than the ancient, because the powers of the latter were chimerical, while those of the former were real and practical, under such circumstances I should certainly have thrown Agrippa aside, and have contented my imagination, warmed as it was by the returning with greater ardour to my former studies. It is even possible that the train of my ideas would never have received the fatal impulse that led to my ruin, but the cursory glance my father had taken of my volume by no means assured me that he was acquainted with its contents, and I continued to read with the greatest avidity. When I returned home, my first care was to procure the whole works of this author, and afterwards of Paracelsus and Albertus Magnus. I read and studied the wild fantasies of these writers with delight. They appeared to me treasures known to few beside myself. I have described myself as always having been imbued with a fervent longing to penetrate the secrets of nature. In spite of the intense labour and wonderful discoveries of modern philosophers, I always came from my studies discontented and unsatisfied. Sir Isaac Newton is said to have avowed that he felt like a child picking up shells beside the great and unexplored ocean of truth. Those of his successors in each branch of the natural philosophy with whom I was acquainted appeared even to my boy's apprehensions as tyros engaged in the same pursuit. Tyros. Unsurprisingly, plural of tyro, a beginner, a novice. Yep, tyro. And so presumably tyros. The untaught peasant beheld the elements around him, and was acquainted with their practical uses. The most learned philosopher knew little more. He had partially unveiled the face of nature, but her immortal lineaments were still a wonder and a mystery. He might dissect, anatomize, and give names, but not to speak of a final cause. Causes in their secondary and tertiary grades were utterly unknown to him. I had gazed upon the fortifications and impediments that seemed to keep human beings from entering the citadel of nature, and rashly and ignorantly I had repined. But here were books, and here were men who had penetrated deeper and knew more. I took their word for all that they averred, and I became their disciple. Averred? Is that similar to avowed, or things they assert to know? To assert the truth of, to affirm. Aver. I took the word for all that they averred, and I became their disciple. It may appear strange that such should arise in the 18th century, but while I followed the routine of education in the schools of Geneva, I was, to a great degree, self-taught with regard to my favourite studies. My father was not scientific, and I was left to struggle with a child's blindness, added to a student's thirst for knowledge, under the guidance of my new preceptors. A teacher or tutor. From Latin praeceptor, commander, instructor. Under the guidance of my new preceptors, I entered with the greatest diligence into the search of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life, but the latter soon obtained my undivided attention. Wealth was an inferior object, but what glory would attend to the discovery if I could banish disease from the human frame and render man invulnerable to any but a violent death? Nor were these my only visions. The raising of ghosts or devils was a promise liberally accorded by my favourite authors, the fulfilment of which I most eagerly sought, and if my incantations were always unsuccessful, I attributed the failure rather to my own inexperience and mistake than to a want of skill or fidelity in my instructors. And thus for a time I was occupied by exploded systems, mingling, like an unadept, 1,000 contradictory theories and floundering desperately in a very slough of multifarious knowledge, guided by an ardent imagination and childish reasoning, till an accident again changed the current of my ideas. When I was about 15 years old, we had retired to our house near Bellerive, when we witnessed a most violent and terrible thunderstorm. It advanced from behind the mountains of Jura, and the thunder burst at once with frightful loudness from various quarters of the heavens. I remained, while the storm lasted, watching its progress with curiosity and delight. As I stood at the door, on a sudden I beheld a stream of fire issue from an old and beautiful oak, which stood about 20 yards from our house, and so soon as the dazzling light vanished, the oak had disappeared, and nothing remained but a blasted stump. When we visited it next morning, we found the tree shattered in a singular manner. It was not splintered by the shock, but entirely reduced to thin ribbons of wood. I never beheld anything so utterly destroyed. Before this, I was not unacquainted with the more obvious laws of electricity. On this occasion, a man of great research in natural philosophy was with us, and excited by this catastrophe, he entered on the explanation of a theory which he had formed on the subject of electricity and galvanism, which was at once new and astonishing to me. All that he said threw greatly into shade Cornelius Agrippa, Albertus Magnus, and Paracelsus, the lords of my imagination, but by some fatality the overthrow of these men disciplined me to pursue my accustomed studies. It seemed to me as if nothing would or could ever be known. All that had so long engaged my attention suddenly grew despicable. By one of these caprices of the mind, which we are perhaps most subject in early youth, I at once gave up my former occupation, set down natural history and all its progeny as a deformed and abortive creation, and entertained the greatest disdain for a would-be science, which could never ever step within the threshold of real knowledge. In this mood of mind I betook myself to the mathematics, and the branches of study appertaining to that science as being built upon secure foundations, and so worthy of my consideration. Thus strangely are our cells constructed, and by such slight ligaments are we bound to prosperity or ruin. When I look back, it seems to me as if this almost miraculous change of inclination and will was the immediate suggestion of the guardian angel of my life, the last effort made by the spirit of preservation to avert the storm that was even then hanging in the stars and ready to envelop me. Her victory was announced by an unusual tranquillity and gladness of soul, which followed the relinquishing of my ancient and latterly tormenting studies. It was thus that I was to be taught to associate evil with their prosecution, happiness with their disregard. It was a strong effort of spirit of good, but it was ineffectual. Destiny was too potent, and her immutable laws had decreed my utter and terrible destruction. Chapter 3. When I had attained the age of 17, my parents resolved that I should become a student at the University of Ingolstadt. I had hitherto attended the schools of Geneva, but my father thought it necessary, for the completion of my education, that I should be made acquainted with other customs than those of my native country. My departure was therefore fixed at an early date, but before the day resolved upon could arrive, the first misfortune of my life occurred, an omen, as it were, of my future misery. Elizabeth had caught the scarlet fever. Her illness was severe, and she was in the greatest danger. During her illness, many arguments had been urged to persuade my mother to refrain from attending upon her. She had at first yielded to entreaties, but when she heard that the life of her favourite was menaced, she could no longer control her anxiety. She attended her sick bed. Her watchful attentions triumphed over the malignity of the distemper. Elizabeth was saved, but the consequences of this imprudence were fatal to her preserver. On the third day my mother sickened. Her fever was accompanied by the most alarming symptoms, and the looks of her medical attendants prognostised the worst event. On her deathbed, the fortitude and benignity of this best of women did not desert her. She joined the hands of Elizabeth and myself. My children, she said, my firmest hopes of future happiness were placed on the prospect of your union. This expectation will now be the consolation of your father. Elizabeth, my love, you must supply my place to my younger children. Alas, I regret that I am taken from you, and happy and beloved as I have been, it is not hard to quit you all. Happy and beloved as I have been, is it not hard to quit you all? These are not thoughts befitting me. I will endeavour to resign myself cheerfully to death, and will indulge at hope of meeting you in another world. She died calmly, and her countenance expressed affection even in death. I need not describe the feelings of those whose dearest ties are rent by that most irreparable evil, the void that presents itself to the soul, and despair that is exhibited on the countenance. It is so long before the mind can persuade itself that she, whom we saw every day, and whose very existence appeared a part of her own, can have departed forever, and that the brightness of a beloved eye can have been extinguished, and the sound of a voice so familiar and dear to the ear can be hushed, never more to be heard. These are the reflections of the first days. But when the lapse of time proves the reality of the evil, then the actual bitterness of the grief commences. Yet from whom has not that rude hand rent away some dear connection? And why should I describe a sorrow which all have felt and must feel? The time at length arrives when grief is rather an indulgence than a necessity, and the smile that plays upon the lips, although it may be deemed a sacrilege, is not banished. My mother was dead, but we had still duties which we ought to perform. We must continue our course with the rest, and learn to think ourselves fortunate, whilst one remains whom the spoiler has not seized. My departure for Ingolstadt, which had been deferred by these events, was now again determined upon. I obtained from my father a respite of some weeks. It appeared to me sacrilege so soon to leave the repose, akin to death, of the house of mourning, and to rush into the thick of life. I was new to sorrow, but it did not the less alarm me. I was unwilling to quit the sight of those that remained to me, and above all, I desired to see my sweet Elizabeth in some degree consoled. She indeed veiled her grief, and strove to act the conformer to us all. and strove to act the comforter to us all. She looked steadily on life and assumed its duties and courage and zeal. She devoted herself to those whom she had been taught to call her uncle and cousins. Never was she so enchanting as at this time, when she recalled the sunshine of her smiles and spent them upon us. She forgot even her own regret in her endeavours to make us forget. The day of my departure at length arrived. Clerval spent the last evening with us. He had endeavoured to persuade his father to permit him to accompany me and to become my fellow student, but in vain. His father was a narrow-minded trader, and saw idleness and ruin in the aspirations and ambitions of his son. Henry deeply felt the misfortune of being debarred from a liberal education. He said little, but when he spoke, I read in his kindling eyes and in his animated glance a restrained but firm resolve not to be chained to the miserable details of commerce. We sat late. We could not tear ourselves away from each other, nor persuade ourselves to say the word farewell. It was said, and we retired under the pretense of seeking repose, each fancying that the other was deceived. But when at morning's dawn I descended to the carriage which was to convey me away, they were all there. My father again to bless me, Clerval to press my hand once more, my Elizabeth to renew her entreaties that I would write often, and to bestow the last feminine attentions on her playmate and friend. I threw myself into the chaise that was to convey me away, and indulged in the most melancholy reflections. I, who had ever been surrounded by amiable companions, continually engaged in endeavouring to bestow mutual pleasure, I was now alone. In the university whither I was going, I must form my own friends and be my own protector. My life had hitherto been remarkably secluded and domestic. This had given me invincible repugnance to the new countenances. I loved my brothers, Elizabeth and Clerval. These were old familiar faces. That's a reference to a poem. The Old Familiar Faces by Charles Lamb. Where was I? I loved my brothers, Elizabeth and Clerval. These were old familiar faces, but I believed myself totally unfitted for the company of strangers. Such were my reflections as I commenced my journey. But as I proceeded, my spirits and hopes rose. I ardently desired the acquisition of knowledge. I had often, when at home, thought it hard to remain during my youth cooped up in one place, and had longed to enter the world and take my station among other human beings. Now my desires were complied with, and it would indeed have been folly to repent. I had sufficient leisure for these and many other reflections during my journey to Ingolstadt, which was long and fatiguing. At length the high white steeples of the town met my eyes. I alighted and was conducted to my solitary apartment to spend the evening as I pleased. The next morning I delivered my letters of introduction and paid a visit to some of the principal professors. Chance, or rather the ill influence of the angel of destruction, which asserted omnipotent sway over me from the moment I turned my reluctant steps from my father's door, led me first to Mr. Krempe, professor of natural philosophy. He was an uncouth man, but deeply imbued in the secrets of his science. He asked me several questions concerning my progress in the different branches of science appertaining to natural philosophy. I replied carelessly, and partly in contempt, mentioned the names of my alchemists and the principal authors I had studied. The professor stared. "Have you," he said, "really spent your time studying in such nonsense?" I replied in the affirmative. "Every minute," continued Mr. Krempe with warmth, "every instant that you have wasted on those books is utterly and entirely lost. You have burdened your memory with exploded systems and useless names. Good God, in what desert land have you lived, where no one was kind enough to inform you that these fallacies which you have so greedily imbibed are 1,000 years old, and as musty as they are ancient? I little expected in this enlightened and scientific age to find a disciple of Albertus Magnus and Paracelsus. My dear sir, you must begin your studies entirely anew." So saying, he stepped aside and wrote down a list of several books treating of natural philosophy, which he desired me to procure, dismissed me after mentioning that in the beginning of the following week he intended to commence a course of lectures upon natural philosophy in its general relations, and that M. Waldman, a fellow professor, would lecture upon chemistry the alternate days that he omitted. I returned home, not disappointed, for I have said that I had long considered these authors useless whom the professor reprobated. I returned, not at all the more inclined to recur to these studies in any shape. Mr. Crump was a little squat man with a gruff voice and a repulsive countenance. The teacher, therefore, did not prepossess me in favour of his pursuits. In rather a too philosophical and connected a strain, perhaps, I have given an account of the conclusions I had come to concerning them in the early years. As a child, I had not been content with the results promised by the modern professors of natural science, with a confusion of ideas only to be accounted for by my extreme youth, and my want of a guide on such matters. I had retrod the steps of knowledge along the paths of time, and exchanged the discoveries of recent inquirers for the dreams of forgotten alchemists. Besides, I had a contempt for the uses of modern natural philosophy. It was very different when the masters of the science sought immortality and power. Such views, although futile, were grand, but now the scene was changed. The ambition of the inquirer seemed to limit itself to the annihilation of those visions on which my interest in science was chiefly founded. I was required to exchange chimeras of boundless grandeur for... chimeras. I've been mispronouncing this the whole time, haven't I? I was required to exchange chimeras of boundless grandeur for the realities of little worth. Such were my reflections during the first 2 or 3 days of my residence at Ingolstadt, which were chiefly spent in becoming acquainted with the localities and the principal residents in my new abode. But as the ensuing week commenced, I thought of the information which Mr. Cramp had given me concerning the lectures, and although I could not consent to go and hear that little conceited fellow deliver sentences out of a pulpit, I recollected what he had said of M. Waldman, whom I had never seen, as he had hitherto been out of town. Partly from curiosity and partly from idleness, I went into the lecturing room, which M. Waldman entered shortly after. This professor was very unlike his colleague. He appeared about 50 years of age, but with an aspect expressive of the greatest benevolence. A few grey hairs covered his temples, but those at the back of his head were nearly black. His person was short but remarkably erect, and his voice the sweetest I had ever heard. He began his lecture by a recapitulation of the history of chemistry, and the various improvements made by different men of learning, pronouncing with fervour the names of the most distinguished discoverers. He then took a cursory view of the present state of the science, and explained many of its elementary terms, and having made a few preparatory experiments, he concluded with a panegyric upon modern chemistry, the terms of which I shall never forget. The ancient teachers of the science, he said, promised impossibilities and performed nothing. The modern masters promise very little. They know that metals cannot be transmuted, and that the elixir of life is a chimera. But these philosophers, whose hands seem only made to dabble in dirt, and their eyes to pore over the microscope or crucible, have indeed performed miracles. They penetrate into the recesses of nature, and show how she works in her hiding places. They ascend into the heavens. They have discovered how the blood circulates, and the nature of the air we breathe. They have acquired new and almost unlimited powers. They can command the thunders of heaven, mimic the earthquake, and even mock the invisible world with its own shadows. Such were the professor's words. Rather, let me say such the words of fate, announced to destroy me. As he went on, I felt as if my soul were grappling with a palpable enemy. One by one, the various keys were touched which formed the mechanism of my being. Chord after chord was sounded, and soon my mind was filled with one thought, one conception, one purpose. So much has been done, exclaimed the soul of Frankenstein. More, far more will I achieve. Treading in the steps already marked, I will pioneer a new way, explore unknown powers, and unfold to the world the deepest mysteries of creation. I closed not my eyes that night. My internal being was in a state of insurrection and turmoil. I felt that order would thence arise, but I had no power to produce it. By degrees, after the morning's dawn, sleep came. I awoke, and my yesternight's thoughts were as a dream. There only remained a resolution to return to my ancient studies, and to devote myself to the science for which I believed myself to possess a natural talent. On the same day, I paid M. Waldman a visit. His manners in private were even more mild and attractive than in public, for there was a certain dignity in his mien during his lecture, which in his own house was replaced by the greatest affability and kindness. I gave him pretty nearly the same account of my former pursuits that I had given his fellow professor. He heard with attention the little narration concerning my studies and smiled at the names of Cornelius Agrippa and Paracelsus, but without the contempt that M. Krempe had exhibited. He said, these were men to whose indefatigable zeal modern philosophers were indebted for the most of the foundation of their knowledge. They had left us, as an easier task, to give new names and arrange in connected classifications of facts they in a great degree had been the instruments of bringing to light. The labours of men of genius, however, erroneously directed, scarcely ever fail in ultimately turning to the solid advantage of mankind. I listened to his statement, which was delivered without any presumption or affection, and then added that his lecture had removed my prejudices against modern chemists. I expressed myself in measured terms, with the modesty and deference due from a youth to his instructor, without letting escape, inexperience in life would have made me ashamed, any of the enthusiasm which stimulated my intended labours. I requested his advice concerning the books I ought to procure. I am happy, said M. Waldman, to have gained a disciple, and if your application equals your ability, I have no doubt of your success. Chemistry is that branch of natural philosophy in which the greatest improvements have been and may be made. It is on that account that I have made it my peculiar study. But at the same time I have not neglected the other branches of science. A man would make a very sorry chemist if he attended to that department of human knowledge alone. If your wish is to become really a man of science and not merely a petty experimentalist, I should advise you to apply to every branch of natural philosophy, including mathematics. He then took me into his laboratory and explained to me the uses of his various machines, instructing me as to what I ought to procure, and promising me the use of his own when I should have advanced far enough in the science not to derange their mechanism. He also gave me the list of books which I had requested, and took my leave. And I took my leave. Thus ended a day memorably. Thus ended a day memorable to me. It decided my future destiny. Chapter 4. For this day, natural philosophy, and particularly chemistry, in the most comprehensive sense of the term, became nearly my sole occupation. I read with ardour those works, so full of genius and discrimination, which modern inquirers have written on these subjects. I attended the lectures and cultivated the acquaintance of the men of science of the university. I found even in M. Krempe a great deal of sound sense and real information, combined, it is true, with a repulsive physiognomy and manners. Physiognomy, probably. The art or pseudoscience of producing the predominant temper and other characteristic qualities of the mind from the outward appearance, especially from the features of the face. The face or countenance, with respect to the temper of the mind, particularly configuration, cast, or expression of countenance, as denoting character. The art of telling fortunes by inspection of the features, the general appearance or aspect of a thing, without reference to its scientific characteristics. Combined, it is true, with a repulsive physiognomy and manners, but not on that account the less valuable. In M. Waldman I found a true friend. His gentleness was never tinged by dogmatism, and his instructions were given with an air of frankness and good nature that banished every idea of pedantry. In a thousand ways he smoothed for me the path of knowledge, and made the most abstruse inquiries clear and facile to my apprehension. My application was at first fluctuating and uncertain. It gained strength as I proceeded. and soon became so ardent and eager that the stars often disappeared in the light of the morning whilst I was yet engaged in my laboratory. As I applied so closely, it may be easily conceived that my progress was rapid. My ardour was indeed the astonishment of the students, and my proficiency that of the masters. Professor Krempt often asked me with a sly smile how Cornelius Agrippa went on, whilst M. Waldman expressed the most heartfelt exultation in my progress. 2 years passed in this manner, during which I paid no visit to Geneva, but was engaged heart and soul in the pursuit of some discoveries which I hoped to make. None but those who have experienced them can conceive of the enticements of science. In other studies you go as far as others have gone before, and there is nothing more to know, but in a scientific pursuit there is a continual food for discovery and wonder. A mind of moderate capacity, which closely pursues one study, must infallibly arrive at great proficiency in that study, and I, who continually sought the attainment of one object of pursuit, and was solely wrapped up in this, improved so rapidly that at the end of 2 years I made some discoveries in the improvement of some chemical instruments, which procured me great esteem and admiration at the university. When I had arrived at this point, and had become as well acquainted with the theory and practice of natural philosophy as depended on the lessons of any of the professors at Ingolstadt, my residence there being no longer conducive to my improvements, I thought of returning to my friends in my native town, when an incident happened that protracted my stay. One of the phenomena which had peculiarly attracted my attention was the structure of the human frame, and indeed any animal endued with life. Whence I often asked myself, did the principle of life proceed? It was a bold question, and one which has ever been considered as a mystery. Yet with how many things are we upon the brink of becoming acquainted? If cowardice or carelessness did not restrain our enquiries, I revolved these circumstances in my mind, and determined thenceforth to apply myself more particularly to those branches of natural philosophy which relate to physiology. Unless I had been animated by an almost supernatural enthusiasm, my application to the study would have been irksome and almost intolerable. To examine the causes of life, we must first have recourse to death. I became acquainted with the science of anatomy, but this was not sufficient. I must also observe the natural decay and corruption of the human body. In my education, my father had taken the greatest precautions that my mind should be impressed with no supernatural horrors. I do not ever remember to have trembled at a tale of superstition, or to have feared the apparition of a spirit. Darkness had no effect upon my fancy, and a churchyard was to me merely the receptacle of bodies deprived of life, which, from being the seat of beauty and strength, had become food for the worms. Now I was laid to examine the cause and progress of this decay, and forced to spend days and nights in vaults and charnel houses. Charnel, I think. A chapel attached to a mortuary, repository for dead bodies. Yes, charnel. Now I was allowed to examine the cause and progress of this decay, and forced to spend days and nights in vaults and charnel houses. My attention was fixed upon every object the most insupportable to the delicacy of the human feelings. Sorry, let me say that again. My attention was fixed upon every object the most insupportable to the delicacy of human feelings. I see, I think. I saw how the fine form of a man was degraded and wasted. I beheld the corruption of death succeed to the blooming cheek of life. I saw how the worm inherited the wonders of the eye and brain. I paused, examining and analysing all the minutiae of causation. as exemplified in the change from life to death and death to life, until from the midst of this darkness a sudden light broke in upon me. A light so brilliant and wondrous, yet so simple, that while I became dizzy with the immensity of the prospect which it illustrated, I was surprised that among so many men of genius who had directed their inquiries toward the same science, that I alone should be reserved to discover so astonishing a secret. Remember, I am not recording the vision of a madman. The sun does not more certainly shine in the heavens than that which I now affirm is true. Some miracle might have produced it, yet the stages of the discovery were distinct and probable. After days and nights of incredible labour and fatigue, I succeeded in discovering the cause of generation and life. Nay, more, I became capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter. The astonishment which I had first experienced on this discovery soon gave place to delight and rapture. After so much time spent in painful labour, to arrive at once at the summit of my desires was the most gratifying consumption of my toils. But this discovery was so great and overwhelming that all the steps by which I had been progressively led to it were obliterated, and I beheld only the result. What had been the study and desire of the wisest men since the creation of the world was now within my grasp. Not that, like a magic scene, it all opened upon me at once. The information I had obtained was of a nature rather to direct my endeavours so soon as I should point them toward the object of my search. Sorry, let me try that again. The information I had obtained was of a nature rather to direct my endeavours so soon as I should point them towards the object of my search, than to exhibit the object already accomplished. I was like the Arabian who had been buried with the dead, and found a passage to life aided only by one glimmering and seemingly ineffectual light. I'm not 100% sure what the Victor, the speaker, means when he says the information I'd obtained was of a nature rather to direct my endeavours so soon as I should point them towards the object of my search than to exhibit the object already accomplished. My best guess is it might be saying that what he had learnt meant that not that he immediately knew everything there was to know on the subject, but rather if he had a objective, a goal that he desired, then he could very effectually direct his efforts in that direction. Very effectively, very effectually direct his efforts and get a result quickly. But I could be wrong, I may be misunderstanding that. I see by your eagerness and the wonder and hope which your eyes express, my friend, that you expect to be informed of the secret with which I am acquainted. That cannot be. Listen patiently to the end of my story, and you will easily perceive why I am reserved upon that subject. I will not lead you on, unguarded and ardent as I then was, to your destruction and infallible misery. Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example, how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world, than he who aspires to become greater than nature will allow. When I found so astonishing a power placed within my hands, I hesitated a long time concerning the manner in which I should employ it. Although I possessed the capacity of bestowing animation, yet to prepare a frame for the reception of it, with all its intricacies of fibres, muscles, and veins, still remained a work of inconceivable difficulty and labour. I doubt at first whether I should attempt the creation of a being like myself, or one of simpler organisation, but my imagination was too exalted by my first success to permit me to doubt of my ability to give life to an animal as complex and wonderful as man. The materials at present within my command hardly appeared adequate to so arduous an undertaking, but I doubted not that I should ultimately succeed. I prepared myself for a multitude of reverses. My operations might be incessantly baffled, and at last my work be imperfect, Yet when I considered the improvement which every day takes place in science and mechanics, I was encouraged to hope my present attempts would at least lay the foundation of future success. Lay the foundations of future success. Nor could I consider the magnitude and complexity of my plan as any argument of its impracticability. It was with these feelings that I began the creation of a human being. As the minuteness of parts formed a great hindrance to my speed, I resolved, contrary to my first intention, to make the being of a gigantic stature, that is to say, about 8 feet in height and proportionately large. After having formed this determination, and having spent some months in successfully collecting and arranging my materials, I began. No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onward, like a hurricane, in the first enthusiasm of success. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through and pour a torrent of light into a dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might in the process of time, although I now found it impossible, that's all. Does it mean, although I now find it impossible? Let me go back and read that again. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might in the process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. These thoughts supported my spirits. While I pursued my undertaking with unremitting ardour, my cheek had grown pale with study, and my person had become emaciated with confinement. Sometimes on the very brink of certainty I failed, yet still I clung to the hope which the next day or the next hour might realise. One secret which I alone possessed was the hope to which I dedicated myself, and the moon gazed on my midnight labours, while with unrelaxed and breathless eagerness I pursued nature to her hiding places. Who shall conceive the horrors of my secret toil, as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave, or tortured the living animal to animate the lifeless clay? My limbs now tremble, and my eyes swim with remembrance. But then a resistless and almost frantic impulse urged me forwards. I seemed to have lost all soul or sensation but for this one pursuit. It was indeed but a passing trance that only made me feel with renewed acuteness so soon as, the unnatural stimulus ceasing to operate, I had returned to my old habits. I collected bones from charnel houses, and disturbed with profane fingers the tremendous secrets of the human frame, in a solitary chamber or rather cell at the top of the house, and separated from all other apartments by a gallery and staircases, I kept my workshop a filthy creation. My eyeballs were starting from their sockets in attending to the details of my employment. The dissecting room and the slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials, and often did my human nature turn with loathing from my occupation, while still urged on by eagerness which perpetually increased. I brought my work near to a conclusion. The summer months passed while I was thus engaged, heart and soul in one pursuit. It was a most beautiful season. Never did the fields bestow a more plentiful harvest or the vines yield a more luxuriant vintage, but my eyes were insensible to the charms of nature, and the same feelings which made me neglect the scenes around me caused me also to forget those friends who were so many miles absent, and whom I had not seen for so long a time. I knew my silence disquieted them, and I well remembered the words of my father. I know that while you are pleased with yourself, you will think of us with affection, and we shall hear regularly from you. You must pardon me if I regard any interruption in your correspondence as proof that your other duties are equally neglected. I knew well, therefore, what would be my father's feelings, but I could not tear my thoughts from my employment, loathsome in itself, but which had taken an irresistible hold on my imagination. I wished, as it were, to procrastinate all that related to my feelings of affection until the great object, which swallowed up every habit of my nature, should be completed. I then thought that my father would be unjust if he ascribed my neglect to vice, or faultiness on my part. But I am now convinced that he was justified in conceiving that I should not be altogether free from blame. A human being in perfection ought always to preserve a calm and peaceful mind, and never to allow passion or transitory desire to disturb his tranquillity. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. If the study to which you apply yourself has a tendency to weaken your affections, and to destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly mix, then that study is certainly unlawful, that is to say, not befitting the human mind. This rule was always observed: if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquillity of his domestic affections, Greece had not been enslaved, Caesar would have spared his country, America would have been discovered more gradually, and the empires of Mexico and Peru had not been destroyed. But I forget that I am moralizing in the most interesting part of my tale, and your looks remind me to proceed. My father made no reproach in his letters, and only took notice of my silence by inquiring into my occupations more particularly than before. Winter, spring, and summer passed away during my labours, but I did not watch the blossom or the expanding leaves, sights which before always yielded me supreme delight, so deeply was I engrossed in my occupation. The leaves of that year had withered before my work drew near to a close, and now every day showed me more plainly how well I had succeeded. But my enthusiasm was checked by my anxiety, and appeared rather like one doomed by slavery to toil in the mines or any other unwholesome trade, than an artist occupied by his favourite employment. Every night I was oppressed by a slow fever, and I became nervous to a most painful degree. The fall of a leaf startled me, and I shunned my fellow creatures as if I had been guilty of a crime. Sometimes I grew alarmed at the wreck I perceived that I had become. The energy of my purpose almost sustained me. My labours would soon end, and I believed that exercise and amusement would then drive away incipient disease, and I promised myself both of these, when my creation should be complete. So, that concludes the prose section of this stream. So, let's move on to the riddles. I believe last week we finished on riddle 100. My face is smooth and wondrous bright, which mostly I keep out of sight. Within my house, how that is made, shall with much brevity be said. Composed with timber and with skin, covered with blankets warm within. Here I lie snug unless in anger, I look out sharp, suspecting danger, for I'm a blade of mighty wrath. Whenever provoked I sally forth, yet quarrels frequently decide, but never am known to change my side. Though ever so much our parties vary, in all disputes my point I carry. Thousands by me are daily fed, as many laid among the dead. I travel into foreign parts, but not in coach conveyed or carts. Ladies for you I often wore, then in return my name declare. And I believe the solution to that riddle is the sword. The sword. So let's move on to the first new riddle today. 101. Sprung from the noblest, meanest race, I being boast in every place. Newcastle, Chester, London, Dover, in short the universe all over. Exalted likewise is my station, I'm looked up to by all the nation. Not Proteus' self had half my shapes, a lion's here, and there's an ape. A king sometimes I am, and throw my smiles on little folks below. Sometimes his consort queen I stand, with flaming sceptre in my hand. Fired with the fury of the war, I now ascend Bologna's car. As Rodney or as Eliot ride, with ship or cannon by my side. Or mounted on the horse poetic, defiance dart at every critic. In the form of Shakespeare, Johnson, Pope, who surely never had a hope, this never world again to rhyme in, or give their quills another priming. A coach and six sometimes I run, at others glow a golden sun. Descending thence I seek the cot, or tinker grim and rise a pot. Or friendly to the cobbler's news, I stand confessed a pair of shoes. I mark a friendly invitation to every being in the nation. Say, reader, whence I really came, and give my motley form a name. Imagination? Because in the mind's eye, those that have passed on could still exist. All those objects could be, could also exist. That's my best guess. A sign. I don't think I'd have got that. Sprung from the noblest, meanest race, I being boast in every place, Newcastle, Chester, London, Dover, in short the universe all over. Exalted likewise is my station, I'm looked up to by all the nation. Oh, okay. That was the big clue I missed. Not approach yourself at half my shapes, as lions here and there's an ape's. A king sometimes I am, and throw my smiles on little folks below. Sometimes as consort queen I stand, with flaming sceptre in my hand. Fired with the fury of the war, I now ascend Bologna's car, as Rodney or as Eliot ride. I'm not sure who those are references to. With ship or cannon by my side, or mounted on the horse poetic, defiance dart at every critic. Inform of Shakespeare, Johnson, Pope, who surely never had a hope, this never world again to rhyme in, or give the quills another priming. A coach and six sometimes I run, as others glow a golden sun. Descending thence I seek the cot of tinker grim and rise a pot. Or, friendly to the cobbler's news, I stand confessed a pair of shoes. I mark a friendly invitation to every being in the nation. Say, reader, whence I really came, and give my motley form a name. So, 102. Let matchless Pindar still invoke the nine, whose lofty strains in stately numbers shine. Let laureate bards attune their annual lays, to him whose merits claim their warmest praise. The task be mine, dear ladies, to unfold what better far and dearer too than gold. Without my aid the pastor could not preach, without my aid the tutor could not teach, without my aid the poet could not write, without my aid the hero could not fight. Without my aid the plodder could not sow, without my aid the rustic could not mow, without my aid the wiser could not hoard. Without my aid the miser could not hoard. His paltry pelf, with which his coffers stored, the soldier brave upon the hostile plain, for want of me to quell his foes, is slain. The sailor bold, when on the ocean tossed, for want of me to save his life is tossed. The sailor bold, when on the ocean tossed, oh, that makes sense. For want of me to save his life is lost. The faithful fair one and the lovesick swain oft wish for me to fix the roseate chain. When I refuse, they feel despair's keen pain. Part of mankind salute me with respect, part of mankind pass by me with neglect. But mark, while those are recompensed with gain, behold here these are punished for disdain. Then fair one's mind unto these hints attend, and when you find me, treat me as a friend. Courage, maybe? Let matchless Pindar still invoke the nine. Pindar. Pindar was an ancient Greek lyric poet from Thebes. Of the canonical 9 lyric poets of ancient Greece, his work is best preserved. Let matchless Pinter still invoke the nine, whose lofty strains in stately numbers shine. Let laureate bards attune their annual lays to him whose merits claim their warmest praise. The task be mine, dear ladies, to unfold what's better far and dearer too than gold. Without my aid the pastor could not preach, without my aid the tutor could not teach, without my aid the poet could not write, without my aid the hero could not fight, without my aid the plodder could not sow, without my aid the rustic could not mow, without my aid the miser could not hoard his paltry pelf with which his coffer is stored. Pelf, money, riches, gain, derogatory dated, especially when dishonesty acquired, lucre, mammon. Palf. But if it rhymes with elf, then that should be pelf. Self, pelf. Yeah. Pelf, presumably. His paltry pelf with which his coffer stored. Yeah, courage doesn't make sense to that. Without my aid, the miser could not hoard his paltry pelf with which his coffer's stored. A strong box or chest used for keeping money or valuables. Coffer. Okay. The soldier brave upon the hostile plain. Okay, well if the soldier's already brave, then it's not courage. For want of me to quell his foes is slain. The sailor bold when on the ocean tossed, for want of me to save his life is lost. The faithful fair one and the lovesick swain oft wish for me to fix the roseate chain. When I refuse, I feel despair's keen pain. Part of mankind salute me with respect, part of mankind pass by me with neglect. But mark, while those are recompensed with gain, behold, here these are punished for disdain. And fair one's minds unto these hints attend, and when you find me, treat me as a friend. providence or fortune? But that would seem like a bit of a generic answer. Education? A pastor, religious education to preach, a sailor, being taught how to swim, a soldier taught how to fight. Education, tuition, apprenticeship, anything along those lines, perhaps. The faithful fair one and the lovesick swain oft wish for me to fix a roseate chain. What's roseate mean? Like a rose. I wonder what they mean by roseate chain. When I refuse, I feel despair's keen pain. Part of mankind salute me with respect. Part of mankind pass me by with neglect. Science? Or education? I'm not sure what they mean by the roseate chain. I'm guessing education. That's my best guess. Power. Let matchless Pinder still invoke the nine, whose lofty strains in stately numbers shine. Let laureate bards attune their annual lays, to him his merits claim their warmest praise. The task be mine, dear ladies, to unfold what's better far and dearer to than gold. Without my aid the pastor could not preach, without my aid the tutor could not teach, without my aid the poet could not write, without my aid the poet could not fight, without my aid the plodder could not sow, without my aid the rustic could not mow, without my aid the miser could not hoard his paltry pelf which his coffers stored. The soldier brave upon the hostile plain, for want of me, to quell his foes is slain. The sailor bold, when on the ocean tossed, for want of me, to save his life is lost. The faithful fair one and the lovesick swain oft wish for me to fix the roseate chain. When I refuse, they feel despair's keen pain. Part of mankind salute me with respect, part of mankind pass me by with neglect. But mark, while those are recompensed with gain, behold, here these are punished for disdain. Oh, that's an interesting use of those and these, to refer back alternately to two different lines. Then fair one's mind unto these hints attend, and when you find me, treat me as a friend. I guess that makes sense. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. One more go. Ye learned fair, when first I had my birth, I cannot say, but now I sprung from earth. Soon as I'm formed, oh, how shall I disclose the dreadful tale, big with my future woes? I'm compelled, those scorning flames to go, like Sadretched, Meshach, and Abednego, As gold by fire is purged from the dross, it gains new beauty and a brighter gloss. So I, when scraped from my cursed retreat, appeared unspotted amongst the poor and great. But no, alas, and I the truth declare, I never permitted to attend the fair, unless some threatening ills destroy their bliss, and from the maid I steal a balmy kiss. But as if envious of her fragrant breath, I make it noisome as the house of death. As burning Etna and Vesuvius roars, and clouds the skies ere they emit their stores, so when my breath bedims the face of day, consumed fires upon my vitals prey, which in short time through my fair body runs, and makes me black as Afric's sooty suns. Charming. Then once again I'm plunged through the flame, which for a while restores my former fame. But oh, ye fair, when age makes beauty fail, short is the time when we with art prevail. For like your charms, mine quickly will decay, and soon or late I meet my kindred clay. Then, ye fair, my worth and splendour o'er, for when I fall to rise no more. I haven't a clue. So it was born through flame. Now we need to look up these proper nouns. Shadrach. Maybe I'd be better off looking on Wiktionary. Nope. Oh, these are the ones. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Figures from the biblical book of Daniel, primary chapter 3. In the narrative, the 3 Hebrew men are thrown into fiery furnace by Nebuchadnezzar II, king of Babylon, for refusing to bow to the king's image. The 3 are preserved from harm, and the king sees 4 men walking in the flames, the 4th like a son of God. They are first mentioned in Daniel 1, where alongside Daniel they are brought to Babylon to study Chaldean language and literature with a view to them serving at the king's court, and their Hebrew names are replaced with Chaldean or Babylonian names. The first 6 chapters of Daniel are stories dating from the late Persian, early Hellenistic period, and Daniel's absence from the story of their Hebrew children in the fiery furnace suggests that it may originally have been independent. It forms a pair with the story of Daniel in the lion's den, both making the point that God of the Jews will deliver those who are faithful to him. Oh. I'm compelled those scorching flames to go. I wonder if that should be through. I'm compelled through scorching flames to go, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as gold by fire is purged from the dross, it gains new beauty and a brighter gloss. So it was born through fire. I doubt it's another metal being purified though, because that would be too obvious. I mean, it's not impossible, but it seems unlikely. So I, when scraped from my cursed retreat, appeared unspotted amongst the poor and great. But now, alas, and I the truth declare, I'm never permitted to attend the fair, unless some threatening ills destroy their bliss. And from the maid I steal a balmy kiss. Balmy. Could this be medicinal in nature? Producing balm, soothing or fragrant, of whether mild and pleasant. as if envious of her fragrant breath, I make it noisome as the house of death. We'd assume the house of death wouldn't be noisy at all. Does it render her mute? Noisome does mean noisy, doesn't it? Oh no, morally hurtful or noxious. Hurtful or noxious to health. Okay. Offensive to the senses, disgusting, unpleasant, nauseous. Okay. Make it noisome as the house of death. Okay, so it's as if envious of her fragrant breath, and make it noisome as the house of death. So her breath becomes noxious? As burning Etna and Vesuvius roars, and cloud the skies ere they emit their stores, so when my breath bedims the face of day, consuming fires upon my vitals prey, which in short time through my fair body runs, and makes me black as Afric's sooty suns. Then once again I plunge through the flame, which for a while restores my former fame. But O ye fair, when age makes beauty fail, short is the time that we are with art prevail. For like your charms mine quickly will decay, and soon or late I meet my kindred clay. Then, ye fair, my worth and splendour o'er, for when I fall to rise no more. I wonder if it's some substance used in makeup which is toxic, and it sounds like only used when a woman's beauty is starting to fail, but can only be used for a short time. It's not clear if it can only be used for a short time because it's actually damaging them, or if it just means the window of opportunity is very short for any other reason. I don't know. Lead. Lead was used in makeup. That is an utter guess, though. Tobacco pipe. Tobacco is very toxic. Why would the answer to that riddle be a tobacco pipe, though? Ye learned fair, when first I had my birth, I cannot say, but now I sprung from earth. Well, tobacco pipes could have been made from clay, certainly. As soon as I'm formed, oh, how shall I disclose the dreadful tale, big with my future woes? I'm compelled, those scorching flames to go, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. As gold by fire is purged from the dross, it gains new beauty and a brighter gloss. So I, when scraped from my cursed retreat, appeared unspotted amongst the poor and great. But now, alas, and I the truth declare, I never permitted to attend the fair, lest some threatening ills destroy their bliss. Then from the maid I steal a balmy kiss. So smoking a pipe. But not permitted to attend the fair. That is interesting and strange. So women that weren't beautiful could smoke, but beautiful women couldn't? Or is it a reference to age? But as if envious of a fragrant breath, I make it noisome as the house of death. That's true. As burning Etna and Vesuvius roars, and the cloud the skies ere they emit their store, so when my breath bedims the face of day, consuming fires upon my vitals prey. Which in short time through my fair body runs, and makes me black as Afric's sooty suns. Yes, this makes sense. This is all a description of smoking a pipe. Then once again I plunge through the flame, which for a while restores my former fame. But oh, ye fair, when age makes beauty fail, short is the time when we with art prevail. For like your charms, mine quickly will decay, and soon or late I meet my kindred clay. Then, ye fair, my worth and splendour o'er, for when I fall to rise no more. It sounds like the more they used a pipe, the more tarnished it would become. And then it sounds like they possibly fired it again to clean it somehow. But if they kept doing it, eventually it would fail. And at that point it would rise no more. That is very curious. I wonder if that is actually what it's describing, or if I've misinterpreted it somehow. Interesting, anyway. It is a pity I didn't get one right, but never mind. I'll get one right one day. I wonder if they were actually supposed to get harder the further in you get, hence why I'm struggling now. Or if there's some other reason. Anyway. Thank you everyone that came to my stream. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be streaming again on Friday, in which I intend to start Myst 3 Exile, assuming I can get it set up. Saturday will be the same. Monday will be the same. And then we're back round to next Wednesday, in which I'll be continuing with Poetry, Prose and Riddles, as we do every Wednesday. So once again, thank you for coming, and have a wonderful night.